The death toll in Milwaukee's mass murder is estimated at 17 tonight.
Police have arrested 31-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer, who lives in the apartment.
The street in front of the building has been packed for hours with people, obviously curious to see where the grisly murders occurred.
The day that the case broke with Jeffrey Dahmer, July 23rd, 1991, there was a lot of media corners, it was a lot of police over there. Somebody just came to me and showed me a picture of a head detached. I knew instantly that that's the boy who I had in my arms. That's how I found out what happened to him. It could have been prevented. It shouldn't have happened like that. It just hurts my soul.
You remember that first visit that I had with you at the jail?
Yeah.
What kind of thoughts were going through your mind?
Oh, I was so stunned that it all happened that I didn't want to see anybody. Didn't know how the reaction would be.
Were you thinking about me or Grandma or anything?
Everybody, you, Grandma.
Family members found bones in the trash and a vat of foul-smelling chemicals containing bones and a slimy residue.
3 victims apparently died in Dahmer's grandmother's house in West Allis.
Dahmer claims the killings took place while his grandmother was away or asleep.
I'm trying to find clues how this came about.
I was so wrapped up in what I was doing. Just a real obsession.
Well, this is the front of the house. It was built in 1939, right? And there were hardly any houses around at that time. We're down in Catherine Dahmer's basement right now. And this is the cat that Jeff loves very much. And Jody likes Jeff very much. They cuddle together on the living room floor upstairs.
She's always so happy to see him when he comes down.
It's the late 80s. Lionel Dahmer decides that it would be a good idea for Jeffrey to go live with his grandmother, Lionel's mother, in West Allis, Wisconsin, which is a small suburb of Milwaukee. Lionel thinks that the biggest problem we have here is that his son is having fantasies about men and might have pornography. Lionel is thinking, if I can have him around someone stable, then perhaps he'll get on a better path. But years later, when Dahmer was sent to prison, he tells his father about the things he did.
One thing I wanted to share with you. Remember when you visited Grandma? Remember that small 1-by-1 square foot box? It was wooden, but it had a metal covering. And you were very insistent that I open that up because you thought I had pornography magazines.
Yeah, that's right, I did.
And
I never thought anything more than that.
Lionel's now finding out the really dark, dark truth of his son.
I was arguing with you because I didn't want to open up that case.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we almost came to blows. So I went out the door, and I came back in about 2 minutes later, apologizing and everything, and you were on your way down to the basement to break the locks open on the gate.
Jeffrey Dahmer was frequenting the gay bars and the bathhouses, bringing men back with him and then killing them.
You know what was in it, don't you?
No.
The mummified head and genitals of the last victim at the West Dallas location.
Lionel had no idea. Why would anybody have any idea of the horror that Jeffrey Dahmer was acting out in his grandmother's basement?
And we're coming upstairs from the basement. I'm gonna go in the backyard through the back door.
Okay.
Walking over here on the side. See all the bars in the windows down there? Jeff and I put all those bars in to keep them more secure.
My name is Ron Flowers. I had an encounter with Jeffrey Dahmer around April of 1988. He tried to kill me. It was a regular night out at 219. My life was real compartmentalized back then. I was not openly gay. In 219, it was a safe place because that's where all of my friends were, and you didn't have to deal with other folks who were either racist or anti-gay. Somewhere between 12 and 1, I left. I went across the street to the parking lot where my car was, and I couldn't get the car to start because the battery had died. So this person who introduced himself as Jeff told me that we could take a cab back to his place, and then he would get his car and come back and give me a jump so I could be on my way. In the cab, he seemed a little odd. He had like a monotone voice. He was nervous, extremely nervous when there was supposedly no reason for him to be nervous. I don't know, I just didn't trust him. We went in the house. He said, "I'll take you back, but first I want to make some coffee." And then I heard someone say, "Jeff, is that you?" He jumped up really quick and he said, "Yeah, it's me, Grandma. I'm just making myself something to eat." He had never mentioned that he lived with a grandmother or anybody else. He looked really nervous. He was shaking. He does this little funny thing with his lip. It's like a nervous tick where he kind of pops his lip. I was trying to get out of there, and I drank the coffee. I drank it really quick, and I could see him kind of relaxing. And I remember lifting my head up like this, looking straight up. And then I know exactly what I said because I remember it was like, "Oh, fuck," pardon my language. And then I just remember going forward. And the last thing I saw was his shoes before I hit the floor. I was in that house for 4 days. So a lot of it I had to piece together. And it took me a little while to piece together, so I just remember fear, paralyzing fear. I remember fighting with someone in the basement. And I also remember passing out again, and that happened a few times. I remember one time that I woke up And I could tell from my peripheral vision that there was a light source behind me, but it was going up the stairs. And then I turned and ran towards the light source. I remember getting to the top of the stairs with my hand on the doorknob, and I felt a hand grab me by the ankle and pull me back down. My head bouncing. I thought that I was going to die.
Jeffrey Dahmer lived with his grandma, and so while he was living there, he had killed 3 victims in the basement, disposed of some of those bodies totally, saved some parts of other victims. When Flowers was in the basement, Grandma comes down and interrupts, and Dahmer says, "Oh boy, I better not kill this guy. I got to get him out of the house now."
My next memory was him trying to strangle me. I was at another location, and I don't know how he got me out of the house. My theory is that his grandmother saw me there multiple times, so he wasn't able to kill me there, so he had to take me somewhere else to do it. I was in a field. Just as I opened my eyes, there were 2 ladies walking on the sidewalk, and they started screaming at him. And he said something like, "Mind your own business, go away." They were cussing and screaming, "We're not going anywhere." And I remember passing out again that time. I remember the grass, the trees, the sunlight, and these 2 ladies. Next thing I know, I woke up in a room on a gurney in the hospital. I knew that he was killing people, and he tried to kill me, and there was something that told me that this wasn't his first time. I went to the police department. I was telling them he tried to kill me. You could see the scars where I've been dragged for quite a while, and you could still see the ligature mark on my neck. They took me back to Club 219 so that I can trace the way back to his house. And then they knocked on the door, but nobody came to the door. I called the police the next day and asked them about it, and they said that he gave them a completely different story.
West Dallas police did that investigation. They followed up, talking to Dahmer at the time. Dahmer denied drugging him in any way, just said that Flowers had been drinking and passed out from drinking.
One of the times I went back to the police department, one of them said, "Did you 2 have intercourse?" And I said, "No." And they looked at each other and busted out laughing. They said, "Well, if you were drugged up, how do you know that you didn't have intercourse?" And they were laughing. I don't understand how they didn't listen to the fact that when I told them, I know he's going to do this again, and he's probably done it before. They just kind of shrugged their shoulders. Everybody I talked to said, "You have to understand police mentality. They're not going to do anything because you're black and you're in a white neighborhood and it involves a white perpetrator."
The matter was not pursued any further. The fact that Flowers had gone there voluntarily with him, that certainly factored into their decision. But It was just another example of a time when Dahmer was able to con and fool people. You know, looking back, there was a number of times that I think all the police wish that more could have been done.
So by this time, Jeffrey Dahmer is getting more and more reckless, and his behavior is now becoming more and more concerning to Lionel and to his grandmother, Catherine. His grandmother decided she had had enough. So Jeffrey Dahmer gets kicked out of his grandmother's house, and now he's free. He's left to his own devices in an apartment. The next day, Dahmer lured Somsack Synthesphone, a 13-year-old boy, home with him. Remember, Dahmer doesn't kidnap any of his victims. He is that convincing that they come with him. So the boy came with Dahmer. Dahmer drugged him, sexually assaulted him, and then inexplicably lets him leave. So the boy gets home, and his parents notice that he's not right. And so then the police come for Jeffrey Dahmer. He's arrested.
You remember back when that molestation case came up in about 1988?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Lionel Dahmer actually called Jerry Boyle, very prominent Milwaukee defense attorney, and asked if he would represent him.
Well, I got the call, and I went down to jail, and I met Jeffrey, and I heard the story. He was accused of putting a youngster under some sort of sedative and having his way with the youngster. Dahmer had no record of anything before that crime. Therefore, I'm left with, what do we do now? Let him go in and get 10 years in prison, or we get him help. I thought he was a troubled young man, so I ended up feeling that this kid needed psychiatric help. If we could get him on probation, maybe he'll be okay.
At that time, I thought highly of Boyle, Jerry Boyle, and we didn't know how sick you were. But we're going to do everything in our power, Jeff.
So from where the judge sat in that court case, he sees a defendant, Jeffrey Dahmer, who looks and talks just like a really normal human being. He's got his father there. His father is supporting him. Judge Gardner looked at everything that was in front of him. He looked at a penitent defendant who had family support, who has one of the best criminal defense attorneys, and says, how's the correction with work release?
When Dahmer gets out of prison, he's now looking for any potential place where he's able to kill somebody and dispose of a body without anybody having him on the radar. And so he moves into the Oxford Apartments.
The area around the Oxford Apartments were considered Drug City. As far as the police walking a beat, no, that did not happen. And it's a good chance that if they did try to do that, that they probably would have gotten shot. But the Oxford building was one of the better buildings, a nicer dump around other dumps. Okay, my name is Vernell Bass. I had just come out of prison, fresh. and I ended up at the Oxford Apartments. What surprised me most of all was the fact that my neighbor across the hall was a white guy. No one even knew his name. And I didn't even know his name. I only knew him as Jeff. Well-dressed, clean-shaven, so I would start to say good morning and things of that nature. And now seeing that he doesn't have any hang-ups about the color of my skin, I don't got no hang-ups about the color of his skin, we did kind of get personal with each other, where he told me that he used to live with his grandmother.
It's nothing special, believe me. It's pretty Spartan, but it's livable. So you could show us what it looks like? Yeah, I want you to come over if you feel like it. I haven't done any dusting or vacuuming or anything. I do that on Sundays.
I think I may have been inside of Jeff's apartment a total of maybe 3 to 4 times. I would say that he was a very neat person. He was clean. His sink was not cluttered with dishes that needed to be washed. His fish tank, he always kept it clean.
Remember, I came over to your apartment. I really thought that it was, my impression was very clean and neat. We were impressed.
I did go in his apartment one time and I saw that he had a blue barrel. I asked him, I said, Jeff, why do you have this for? He said, oh, I just wanted it. I said, I could just imagine you riding the bus with this barrel. And we laughed. He turned his back on me and he went towards the bathroom. And when he turned his back on me, I shook it to see if it had anything inside of it, but it was empty. I never had any reason to be fearful of him as my neighbor. I would never have known that my neighbor that I had met that lived across the hall had a criminal record. He told me that he had worked at Ambrosia chocolate factory down the street. Although he never complained about the job, he gave me the impression that he was looking or hoping for something better.
So what have you been doing lately? Working and working and working and working?
Working next week, starting Monday. I go back to work Sunday nights.
Oh, boy. So you go back to work this Sunday night?
Right. And all this next week, I'll be working 12 hours, which will be nice because you can always use the extra money.
Extra money.
Lionel's doing what he can to try and put his son on what he deems to be a good path. But Jeffrey Dahmer is not having it. While he's at work, Jeffrey Dahmer's brought one of the skulls of his victims to his locker at work and kept it in there, so he had a memory of one of his victims.
Can you talk freely there? Okay.
Years later, Lionel really wanted to come to terms with his role or his fault in all of this.
Do you remember ever me participating with bones when you were interested in bones?
No.
And were we eating chicken one time and you asked what would happen if we bleached the bones?
No.
Okay. So I never participated, so to speak, in, putting bleach in a pail.
No.
And working with bones.
No.
Did I ever describe anything to you?
Not that I can recall.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, because that could be just scientific curiosity,
No, nothing that I remember. I pretty much was doing things in my own little world.
Kept it all to yourself. Yeah.
When I hear the tapes, I hear a father looking for answers. His family has no idea the depth to which his behavior has declined. Dahmer is now a full-fledged serial murderer.
It is when he moves into the Oxford Apartments that he seems to be willing to accelerate his killing. He even used the term, I was falling behind. I had victims' bodies at the apartment when I was bringing new victims in, and he said, I never did that before. So, yes, he was getting more brazen.
I ran into Jeffrey Dahmer again at Club 219. He was leaving the club, getting in a car with black men. I couldn't physically get near him, but I kept screaming at the top of my lungs, don't do it. He kills people, don't go with him. And it attracted a lot of attention. And then the guy who was in the cab opened the door and got out and walked away. Jeffrey Dahmer got in the cab by himself, closed the door, and it drove on.
So I had no idea that Jeff was the person that he was. He didn't do drugs. He didn't have money, so he couldn't be robbed. He wasn't interested in the working ladies, the prostitutes. So therefore, he was seen, but yet not seen. He kept his personal life just that, personal. I had no idea of what he liked or who he liked. I had no idea that he even liked men.
So by the end of 1990, Jeffrey Dahmer had killed 9 men. In the coming months, he would kill 8 more men and boys. So he's killing more and more frequently.
I remember talking to my friend and saying, Jeffrey Dahmer, he was after black guys. I wonder why he didn't get a hold of me. And my friend said, it's obvious. Everybody knew who you were. He said, and if you had left with him, everybody would have known, and the jig would have been up because you would have disappeared, and that would have been the end of it. I used to work for 219, one of the showgirls there for many, many years. I remember I was just 18 at the time. There were a few guys that came there to see me perform. And I remember there was a very sweet, small frame little thing. Loved what I did. He was always at the shows. And I know he didn't have a lot of money because he used to tip me so sheepishly. Really, really sweet guy. Tony Hughes.
I met Tony at Club 219. He's a pretty nice guy, very social. Tony is deaf, and he always carried around this little notepad, and that's how he would communicate with people, and struck up a friendship with him. And one day I got tired of writing back and forth to him, so I told him, you have to teach me sign language.
I still know my ABCs from Tony. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Tony Hughes' mom was walking around during Pride Fest 91 looking for him with Tony's photo, asking had anybody seen him, and nobody had seen him. Nobody knew. Nobody had any answers for her.
Shirley Hughes was a good mother. She loved her son. She accepted the fact that Tony was gay, and she knew that he went out to the gay bars and enjoyed himself, but he always came home the next morning. When Tony Hughes didn't come home, Shirley Hughes knew something was wrong.
Tonight, Tony is missing. He has been since last Friday night. And to make matters worse, he cannot speak nor hear.
He's deaf, but he can use sign language.
If Dahmer were going around picking up young blonde girls, this wouldn't be happening, but it was young black gay men. It was easy pickings for him because nobody was looking for the little black queen boys that were disappearing. Nobody was looking for them.
One thing I was wondering about that fish tank of yours.
Yeah.
Were there Siamese fighting fish in there?
No. All I had in there was African cichlids.
And they were, you kind of like those? You kind of fascinated by those?
Yeah, they act like miniature dolphins. They have real personality.
My name's Dan Kraft. I'm a retired profiler. Jeff was a control freak. What I mean by that is he had to be totally in control.
When you say they had a personality, what do you mean?
Oh, I mean, they interacted with you. They'd take food out of your hand.
Oh, you're kidding.
What he really wanted was a subdued victim that had no will, that wouldn't leave.
They'd look at you. They knew when you were in the room, and they'd get excited, and they'd, happily swim back and forth.
That's amazing.
And it was total control over a non-resisting body.
And that was kind of like your pets welcoming you home.
Right. Yeah, it was something that was fun to come home to and feed them in the morning and evening. And I had everything. I had the water chemistry so perfect. It was incredible.
And once he had control of them, he could do what he wanted.
May 27, 1991. It was Memorial Day. I was 17. I was traveling in a car, and I noticed a naked person from a distance, totally naked, staggering, falling. And I jumped out of a car to go help him. When I made it to him, he literally just fell in my arms. I don't know what's wrong, but something wrong. So I dialed 911.
This butt-naked young boy or man or whatever, he's been beaten up real bad. And people are trying to help him stand. He can't stand. He has no clothes on. He is very hurt.
Is he awake?
He ain't awake. They trying to get him to walk, but he can't walk straight. He can't even see straight.
His eyes were dilated. He just was sweating bullets, and he was just holding me like he didn't want me to let him go. He did look like a kid. He did not look to me to be older than 17. And a man walks up. He was white, he was tall, he was clean cut, but his aura, his spirit and energy was dark. The boy body language was defensive and stiff and resistant toward him. I told him, I'm like, I just dialed 911, help is on the way. And this aggravated this man. He literally told me, like, this got nothing to do with you. He's okay, you can leave now. And I'm like, I'm not letting you take him. It took the police almost 2 hours. 3 officers all talking to the man. He was so polite, and he, explained that he was drunk and that was his lover. And I mean, they believed everything he said. One of the officers, patted this man on the back. So I tapped the other officer, and this one, he goes, I've been an officer for 8 years. I do not need no amateur poking in my business. You can be quiet or you can go to jail. And I'm just, at this point, I'm like, I couldn't believe what he just said to me. So yeah, it's unimaginable. It's still unimaginable that all that happened like that. I was thinking I need to go get my auntie, because this man was lying, and it was obvious that he was lying. Maybe they'll listen to her. And when I went to go get her, And it took like about 6 minutes, if that. When we came out, they were gone. So my auntie called the dispatch.
Do you need names or
No, don't need-
information or anything from them?
No, not at all. It's a intoxicated boyfriend of another boyfriend.
How old was this child?
It wasn't a child, it was an adult.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Are you positive?
It's all taken care of, ma'am.
And they were laughing. The police took the little boy back to this white man's apartment. And the officers literally went into the apartment and determined he telling the truth.
They've gone up to the apartment, they've taken a look. The officers believe that everything is fine. These are two guys who are in a relationship, and we're done here. There's no probable cause for those two officers to say, and we'd like to look at the rest of the apartment. If they had, they would have walked into Dahmer's bedroom and Tony Hughes' dead body would have been laying on the bed. Jeffrey Dahmer is trying to figure out how to keep Tony Hughes with him. He has the body on the bed so that he can indulge in his fantasies. And in hindsight, everybody wants them to have looked further in the apartment. But the officers get back in the car and they radio back to dispatch and say, we're done.
The intoxicated Asian naked male was returned to his sober boyfriend. For a minute, my partner's gonna get deloused at the station.
The officers say that they have returned the drunken Asian male, but as soon as the officers left, Jeffrey Dahmer killed him. Later, the police identify him as Connor X. Synthesymphone. He's 14 years old.
Can you imagine how he felt? It's mind-blowing. It just hurts my soul. When I think about it, I try not to think about it, but it's a lot. Can you just imagine that?
Jeffrey Dahmer had drugged Connor X, and the officers assumed he was just extremely intoxicated. Dahmer was no dummy. He was a planner. He planned out his actions. He planned how he was going to lie to people. That's how he was able to keep operating. And unfortunately, what he did with Connor X. Synthesymphone was just another con job that he was able to pull off.
Amazingly, all the times that I should have been caught, I never was. Yeah, that's happening. Many times I could have been caught.
And after that molestation case in '88,
With some sex, centimazone.
The sexual assault victim, for which Dahmer served some jail time before, is the brother of Connor X. Synthesymphone.
If the police would have listened, if they would have did their job, if they would have ran his name, they would have found out he was on probation for child molestation. They would have knew right then and there. He would have been handcuffed right then and there. But he got him and carried on. It went on and on and on.
If instead of Dahmer taking adult gay men back to his place, he was picking up single college co-eds, this would have been a whole different investigation. There's no question that Milwaukee police could have done a better job. There's no question that law enforcement in general could have done a better job.
I should have put him in the car. I should have put him in the car. I should have took him to the hospital. And then he would still be here. And I just didn't do the right thing that night. I thought I was doing the right thing when I called 911. So, yeah, it bothers me still.
The fact that he deceived so many people is a hard pill to swallow, but it explains so clearly why he was able to get away with this as long as he was.
I wasn't seeing Jeff as often as I had been seeing him before. But unknown to me, he had lost his job. And then everyone started to notice a stench. No one knew where it was coming from. The smell was so gross. It smelled like rotting garbage, rotting meat. When we complained, he claimed that the fish died and he left them in the tank, in the water. And that's what the smell was coming from. And I knocked on his door, and I had noticed that his peephole had went dark. Then I could see the light again. So he looked out. He knew I was knocking on his door. There was another time when I heard a machine tool. I had no idea whether it was a saw or a drill. I only know that it was a machine tool.
He would cut the bodies up, dissect them, and then he would put the body parts into a big 55-gallon drum that had acid in it, and then he'd flush it down the toilet. He also said that he would take pictures of all of his victims, and he would have the picture in front of him, and he would be eating part of the body and masturbating. He did, there was a couple victims where he cut off part of their body and grilled it up and ate, as he said, like a steak. You know, the only evidence we have of Dahmer cannibalizing anybody is his statements. There's no real physical evidence to that. But you look at all of his statements and the totality of all of them, I have no reason to believe he would not be truthful about it. He had a fascination with the body and internal parts of the body, and it was part of his fantasy. So he felt that by eating a part of the body, it would become part of him. And that he would own that person.
Jeffrey Dahmer is really accelerating now. He has developed a routine. He meets someone on the street or meets them in a club, offers them money for sex or nude photos. They come back to the apartment with him. Dahmer serves them a drugged drink. And when they start to pass out, Dahmer strangles them and then often would have sex with the body. As the body counts mounted, Jeff's life begins to just completely unravel. He begins to have problems disposing of the bodies. The bodies are literally piling up in his apartment. He was out of control.
Do you remember that night of Monday, July 22nd, 1991?
Yeah, what about it?
Ghastly discovery in Milwaukee today.
And I heard a knock on the door. That police knock. You know the police knock.
Hazardous material teams had been called to remove a 55-gallon drum, contents unknown.
And the officers told me, evacuate your apartment, and you have to do it now.
The death toll in Milwaukee's mass murder is estimated at 17.
The almost unbelievable story.
In custody, expected to be charged.
Police detective calls the number of victims in this crime astronomical.